The police asked, "Why did you lie about your location?" My mother's story fell apart. The detective's voice was calm, almost conversational, but I felt my stomach drop to the floor. "Your mother told us you were with her at Nordstrom from 2:30 to 4:15 p.m. on Tuesday. She said you can verify that." I stared at Detective Martinez across the small table in the police station waiting room, my backpack still slung over one shoulder from when campus security had pulled me out of my organic chemistry lab an hour ago. My mother sat rigid in the chair next to me, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping her Chanel purse so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I started, then stopped. Tuesday afternoon. I remembered exactly where I'd been on Tuesday afternoon, and it definitely wasn't shopping with my mother. "Take your time," Detective Martinez said, but his eyes never left my face. "We just need to confirm the timeline." My mother's hand suddenly clamped down on my wrist. Her nails dug in through my sleeve. "Sweetie, remember? We went to look at those dresses for your cousin's wedding. You tried on that blue one." The thing is, I have a very specific memory of Tuesday afternoon. I was in the library from 1 p.m. until almost 6 p.m., working on my biochemistry research paper with my lab partner Jake. We'd ordered coffee from the campus Starbucks at 2:47 p.m., I remembered because Jake had joked about the timestamp on his mobile order being almost 3 o'clock somewhere. I'd posted an Instagram story of my color-coded notes at 3:22 p.m., geotagged at the university library. But my mother was staring at me with that look. The one I'd grown up with. The one that said you better agree with me right now or there will be consequences. "What's this about?" I asked instead, buying myself time. "Why do you need to know where we were?" Detective Martinez glanced at my mother, then back at me. "There was an incident on Tuesday afternoon. A hit-and-run accident on Maple Street, near the shopping district. A witness reported seeing a vehicle matching your mother's car description leaving the scene around 3:45 p.m. My mother laughed, but it sounded forced. "That's ridiculous. I drive a silver Honda CR-V, half the city drives silver Honda CR Versys. And like I told you, I was shopping with my daughter. We were nowhere near Maple Street." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Maple Street was exactly 6 blocks from our house. I knew because I'd driven down it hundreds of times. And on Tuesday, when I'd finally gotten home from the library around 6:30 p.m., my mother's car had been in the driveway, but I'd noticed the front right bumper looked different. Scratched up. When I'd asked about it at dinner, she'd waved me off and said she'd scraped it on a concrete pillar in a parking garage. "Miss Chen." Detective Martinez was waiting for my answer. My mother's grip on my wrist tightened. Under her breath, barely audible, she whispered, "Don't you dare." But I thought about the research paper I'd been working on. About Jake, who could verify we'd been together. About my Instagram story with the timestamp and location. About security cameras that were probably in every corner of that library. About my student ID card that logged every time I swiped into a building. And I thought about whoever had been hurt on Maple Street on Tuesday afternoon while I was safely studying in the library and my mother was, where exactly? "No," I said quietly. "I wasn't with her." The silence that followed my words felt like it stretched for hours, though it was probably only seconds. My mother's hand went completely still on my wrist, her nails still digging in, but now her grip felt lifeless. Like she'd just been unplugged. "I'm sorry." Detective Martinez leaned forward slightly. "You weren't with your mother on Tuesday afternoon?" "No." My voice came out stronger this time. "I was at the university library from about 1 p.m. until 6:30 p.m. I was working on a research paper with my lab partner, Jake Morrison. We ordered coffee at 2:47 p.m. from the campus Starbucks. I posted on Instagram at 3:22 p.m. from the library." My mother's breathing had gone shallow. I could hear it, quick and sharp, through her nose. "That's..." She started, then stopped. Her free hand went to her throat, touching the pearl necklace she always wore when she was nervous. "Honey, you're confused. Remember? We talked about this. You left the library early that day to meet me." But even as she said it, I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. The same uncertainty I'd heard 3 months ago when she tried to convince my dad that she hadn't dented his car, right up until he'd shown her the security footage from the grocery store parking lot. Detective Martinez was taking notes now. "Jake Morrison, you said? And you have the Instagram post?" I pulled out my phone with my free hand, my mother still hadn't let go of my other wrist, and scrolled back to Tuesday. There it was, a photo of my biochemistry textbook surrounded by highlighters and sticky notes, with "Death by Organic Compounds Loudly Crying Facebook's #LibraryLife #BioChemSucks" as the caption. Posted at 3:22 p.m., geotagged University of California San Diego, Geisel Library. "Here," I said, turning the screen toward him. My mother finally released my wrist and sat back in her chair like she'd been physically pushed. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, but her voice had gone up half an octave. "Maybe I got the days mixed up. We've been shopping so much lately, planning for Emma's wedding, and..." "Mrs. Chen," Detective Martinez interrupted gently. "When we spoke yesterday, you were very specific about the timing. You said you remembered it clearly because you'd had to leave your book club early to meet your daughter at 2:30. You mentioned looking at your watch multiple times because you were worried about traffic." I stared at my mother. Book club was on Thursdays, not Tuesdays. Her book club had been meeting on the same day for the past 4 years, ever since we'd moved to San Diego. She'd never missed a Thursday meeting, and she'd certainly never left early. "Mom," I said slowly. "Your book club is on Thursdays." Something cracked in her expression. For just a moment, I saw panic flash across her face, raw and desperate, before she composed herself again. But it was too late. We'd all seen it. I had to prepare for book club. I was reading at home, and then I went to meet you. She was talking faster now, her words tumbling over each other. Or maybe it was Wednesday we went shopping. This whole week has been such a blur, with work and Emma's wedding planning, and my book club, and... "Ma'am," Detective Martinez said, his voice still patient but more firm now. "I need to ask you directly. Where were you on Tuesday afternoon between 2:30 and 4:15 p.m.? My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in my 19 years of life, I watched my mother, who always had an answer for everything, who could talk her way out of any situation, sit in complete, helpless silence. The silence stretched on until Detective Martinez cleared his throat and tried a different approach. Mrs. Chen, we have traffic camera footage from the intersection of Maple and 4th Street at 3:43 p.m. on Tuesday. The vehicle in question ran a red light immediately after the collision. We can enhance the license plate, but it takes time. That's why we're trying to verify everyone's whereabouts first. Traffic cameras. I watched my mother's face go pale beneath her carefully applied foundation. She'd always been so meticulous about everything, her appearance, her stories, her control over every situation. But she'd never counted on cameras. I want to call my lawyer, she said suddenly. That's your right, Detective Martinez nodded. But Mrs. Chen, if this is just a misunderstanding about timing. It's not a misunderstanding. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. Both my mother and the detective turned to look at me. When I got home Tuesday night, around 6:30, there was damage to the front of her car. Fresh scratches on the right bumper. She told me she'd hit a concrete pillar in a parking garage. My mother's eyes went wide. Emma, stop. Which parking garage? Detective Martinez asked, pen poised over his notepad. I looked at my mother. She was shaking her head slightly, a barely perceptible movement, but I caught it. She didn't say. I asked, but she changed the subject. Mrs. Chen. Which parking garage were you referring to? My mother's hands were trembling now. She clasped them together in her lap, but I could still see the slight shake. There are so many. Downtown, I think. Near the department store. Which department store? Macy's. Or, no, maybe it was near Nordstrom. I don't remember exactly. She was unraveling in real time, and I felt sick watching it happen. This was my mother. The woman who'd raised me, who'd helped me with homework, who'd driven me to countless soccer practices and dance recitals. But this was also the woman who'd spent years making me question my own memory, my own reality. Detective Martinez made another note. We can check with mall security. They'll have footage of their parking structures. This is harassment, my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. My daughter is clearly confused about which day we went shopping. Teenagers don't keep track of time the way adults do. I felt a familiar flush of anger. Even now, even caught in her own lies, she was trying to gaslight me. I'm not confused, Mom. I had my student ID swipe records, my Instagram post, Jake's witness testimony, probably library security footage. I was studying Tuesday afternoon while you were. I trailed off, not wanting to say it out loud. While I was what, Emma? Her voice had turned sharp, dangerous. What exactly are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just telling the truth about where I was. Detective Martinez intervened. Let's focus on the facts. Mrs. Chen, you initially told us you were shopping with your daughter from 2:30 to 4:15 p.m. at Nordstrom on Tuesday. Your daughter has provided evidence that she was at the university library during those hours. Can you explain this discrepancy? My mother stared at the table for a long moment. When she finally looked up, something had changed in her expression. The panic was still there, but underneath it was something harder. More calculating. I think I need that lawyer now, she said. Detective Martinez nodded and stood up. That's absolutely your right, Mrs. Chen. We'll arrange for you to make that call. He paused at the door. Emma, you're free to go. We have your contact information if we need to follow up. But as I started to gather my backpack, my mother's voice stopped me cold. She's lying. I turned around slowly. Detective Martinez had stopped in the doorway, his hand still on the handle. Excuse me, he said. My mother's composure had snapped back into place like a rubber band, and suddenly she was the woman I knew from PDA meetings and charity galas, poised, confident, completely in control. My daughter is lying. She wasn't at the library on Tuesday afternoon. She was with her boyfriend, doing God knows what, and now she's trying to cover it up by throwing me under the bus. The familiar punch of betrayal hit me in the stomach. Even now, even caught red-handed, she was trying to flip the script. Mom, what are you doing? Emma has been acting out for months, she continued, addressing Detective Martinez as if I wasn't in the room. Staying out late, lying about where she's been, hanging around with that boy Jake. I've been covering for her because I didn't want it to affect her college record, but clearly that was a mistake. Jake is my lab partner, I said, my voice shaking. We study together. That's it. Is it? My mother turned to me with raised eyebrows. Then explain why Mrs. Rodriguez from down the street saw his car in our driveway last weekend when you told me you were at the library. My face burned. Jake had come over Saturday afternoon to work on our research paper because the library had been closed for maintenance. We'd studied in the kitchen for 3 hours, and my mother had been home the entire time, had even made us sandwiches. But the way she was framing it now. You were there, I said. You made us lunch. We worked on our biochemistry project at the kitchen table. After you'd been upstairs for over an hour with the door closed, she shot back smoothly. We got my textbooks from my room. It took 5 minutes. Detective Martinez held up a hand. Ladies, please. Mrs. Chen, regardless of your daughter's social life, we still need to account for your whereabouts on Tuesday afternoon. Emma's activities don't change the fact that you told us she was with you when she clearly wasn't. My mother's jaw tightened. Fine. You want the truth. I was covering for her. She called me Tuesday afternoon, crying, begging me to give her an alibi. She said she'd been somewhere she shouldn't have been and that if anyone asked, I needed to say she was with me. The room went dead silent. I felt like I'd been slapped. That never happened, I whispered. Really? My mother pulled out her phone. Because I have the text messages. My blood turned to ice water. She was scrolling through her phone with practiced ease, and I found myself holding my breath. My mother was many things, but she wasn't tech-savvy enough to fake text messages. Was she? Here, she said, turning her screen toward Detective Martinez. Tuesday, 4:23 p.m. Mom, please, if anyone asks, I was with you this afternoon. I'll explain later, but I really need you to say I was with you from 2:30 to 4:15. Please don't ask questions right now. I stared at the screen in complete shock. There, in what looked exactly like my text thread with my mother, was a message I had never sent. The timestamp, the phone number, even the way it was worded, it looked completely real. I didn't send that, I said, but my voice came out weak and uncertain. Detective Martinez was studying the phone carefully. May I? He took the device from my mother and scrolled up and down through the message thread. Emma, can I see your phone? With shaking hands, I pulled up my text conversation with my mother. Tuesday's messages showed our usual exchange, her asking if I'd be home for dinner, me saying I was staying late at the library, her reminding me to text when I got home safe. Nothing about alibis. Nothing about being somewhere I shouldn't have been. This message isn't on my phone, I said, showing him my screen. Messages can be deleted, my mother said calmly. Emma is very good with technology. Much better than I am. The implication hit me like a physical blow. She was suggesting I'd sent the message, then deleted it from my own phone but somehow forgot she'd still have it on hers. It was just plausible enough to create doubt, just technical enough to make me look like I was trying to manipulate evidence. This doesn't make sense, I said desperately. Why would I ask for an alibi if I was actually at the library? If I was really somewhere I shouldn't have been, I would have asked her to say I was at the library, not shopping with her. Detective Martinez looked between us. That's a fair point. But my mother was ready for that too. Because she knew the library has security cameras. She's not stupid. She needed me to say she was somewhere with no surveillance, somewhere only I could verify. I felt the walls closing in around me. She thought this through. Every detail, every counter-argument, every possible angle, she calculated it all. And the worst part was, I could see Detective Martinez beginning to waver. The certainty in his eyes was being replaced by confusion, doubt. I have my student ID records, I said desperately. My card was swiped into the library at 12:47 p.m. and I didn't swipe out until 6:31 p.m. I have my Instagram post. I have Jake who can verify. Jake who she's been lying about, my mother interrupted. Jake whose car has been at our house. Jake who would obviously corroborate whatever story she's telling. The room started to spin slightly. This was what she did. This was how she'd operated my entire life, taking the truth and twisting it, using real details to build false narratives, making me question everything I knew to be real. But this time, lives were at stake. Someone had been hurt on Tuesday afternoon, and she was willing to destroy me to save herself. Detective Martinez set both phones down on the table and rubbed his temples. I'm going to need to have our tech team examine these devices. There are ways to determine if messages have been altered or if there are discrepancies in the metadata. My mother's confident expression flickered for just a moment. Of course. I have nothing to hide. In the meantime, he continued, I'm going to verify some of these details independently. Emma, you mentioned your student ID records. Yes, I said, relief flooding through me. The university tracks every swipe. I can call the registrar's office right now and have them pull my access logs for Tuesday. That won't be necessary. We'll contact them directly. Detective Martinez made another note. And Jake Morrison, I'll need his full contact information. As I rattled off Jake's phone number and dorm room, I watched my mother's jaw tighten incrementally with each digit. She was still sitting perfectly straight, still projecting that air of wounded dignity, but I'd lived with her long enough to recognize the subtle signs of her losing control. Detective, she said, her voice taking on that honey-sweet tone she used with customer service representatives right before she demanded to speak to a manager. I understand you have to be thorough, but this is obviously a very difficult situation for our family. My daughter is clearly struggling with some personal issues, and dragging this out. Mom, stop. The words came out harder than I'd intended. Just stop. She blinked at me in surprise. In 19 years, I don't think I'd ever interrupted her mid-manipulation. Emma, honey, I know you're scared, but I'm not scared. I'm angry. I turned to face her fully. Someone got hurt on Tuesday afternoon. Someone is probably in the hospital right now, and you're sitting here trying to pin it on me rather than just telling the truth about where you were. I am telling the truth. No, you're not. My voice was getting louder, and I didn't care. You're doing what you always do. You're twisting everything around, making me question reality, making everyone else doubt what they know to be true. But this time someone else is involved. Someone who didn't ask to be part of your games. My mother's mask slipped completely. How dare you speak to me like that? After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed. What you've done for me. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. You've spent my entire life making me think I was crazy. Making me apologize for things I didn't do, doubt memories I knew were real, walk on eggshells because I never knew which version of reality we were living in on any given day. That's not. Remember when I was 12 and you convinced Dad I'd been the one who scratched his car? You had me so convinced that I apologized to him, crying, for something I didn't even remember doing. I spent weeks thinking I was losing my mind until I found the insurance claim where you'd admitted to backing into Mrs. Patterson's mailbox. Detective Martinez was watching this exchange with growing interest, his pen poised over his notepad. Or what about junior year when you told my guidance counselor I'd been skipping classes to meet boys? You knew I had perfect attendance. You knew I'd never missed a day. But you needed an excuse for why my grades were slipping, because admitting that I was working 20 hours a week at the grocery store to help pay for your shopping addiction would have been embarrassing. Emma, you're being hysterical. No, I'm being honest. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely honest about who you are and what you do. I turned back to Detective Martinez. My mother is a pathological liar. She lies when it's convenient, she lies when she's caught, and she lies when the truth would work just as well. The only difference is this time, there are cameras. This time, there's evidence she can't manipulate. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother was staring at me like I'd grown a second head, her perfect composure finally completely shattered. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You ungrateful little bitch. Detective Martinez cleared his throat. Mrs. Chen, I think we should continue this conversation after you've spoken with your attorney. The words hung in the air like poison. In 19 years, my mother had called me plenty of things during her rages, selfish, dramatic, ungrateful, but never that. Never with such pure venom. Detective Martinez stood up immediately. Mrs. Chen, I think we need to take a break. Officer Williams will escort you to make your phone call. But as my mother rose from her chair, something seemed to snap inside her. Maybe it was seeing the disgust in Detective Martinez's eyes, or maybe it was realizing that her last-ditch attempt to frame me had completely backfired. Whatever it was, the careful mask she'd worn my entire life finally cracked completely. You want to know where I was Tuesday afternoon? Her voice had turned shrill, almost manic. Fine. I was at home. I was drinking wine and watching Netflix because I'd had another fight with your father about money. Again. Because apparently working part-time at a dental office doesn't contribute enough to this family. My stomach dropped. Mom, don't. No, let me finish. Since we're being so honest now. She turned to Detective Martinez with a bitter laugh. I was drunk by 3 p.m. Completely wasted. And yes, I decided to drive to the store anyway because we were out of coffee and I couldn't function without it. Happy now? Detective Martinez had gone very still. Mrs. Chen, I need to advise you again that you have the right to remain silent. Oh, I know my rights. I watch Law and Order. She was spiraling now, words pouring out like she couldn't stop them. I hit that cyclist at the intersection of Maple and 4th. I didn't even see him until it was too late. The light had just turned red but I was going too fast to stop, and he came out of nowhere. My hands flew to my mouth. A cyclist. Someone on a bike. I panicked, okay. I'd been drinking, I didn't have insurance because we're 3 months behind on payments, and I knew if I stopped I'd lose everything. My job, my license, probably go to jail. So I kept driving. Jesus, Mom. I sank back into my chair, feeling sick. Don't you dare judge me, Emma. You have no idea what it's like to be 43 years old and feel like your life is falling apart. Your father works 16-hour days and still can't keep up with the bills. We're going to lose the house. Did you know that? We're 4 months behind on the mortgage. Detective Martinez was writing furiously now. Mrs. Chen, I really need to stop you there, Anne. And what? I'm already screwed, aren't I? She laughed, but it sounded more like crying. The traffic cameras, the damage to my car, my daughter's alibis all falling apart. You were going to figure it out anyway. I thought about Tuesday evening, coming home to find her making dinner like nothing had happened. She'd asked about my day, helped me with a calculus problem, reminded me to do my laundry. All while knowing she'd left someone injured on the side of the road. Is he okay? I asked quietly. The cyclist. Is he alive? Detective Martinez glanced at my mother, then back at me. He's in stable condition. Broken ribs, fractured pelvis, concussion. He's going to recover, but it's going to be a long process. The relief that flooded through me was immediately followed by rage. You knew someone was hurt and you said nothing. For 3 days, you said nothing. I was scared, my mother whispered. She collapsed back into her chair and suddenly looked much older than 43. I was terrified. And I thought if I could just get through the initial investigation, maybe they wouldn't have enough evidence. Maybe it would just go away. So you decided to use me as your alibi. I panicked. When they called yesterday asking questions, I panicked and said the first thing I could think of. I was going to figure out another way, I was going to. You were going to let me lie to the police for you. The full scope of what she tried to do was hitting me now. You would have let me commit a felony to cover up your hit and run. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Detective Martinez closed his notepad. Mrs. Chen, I'm placing you under arrest for felony hit and run, driving under the influence, and leaving the scene of an accident with injuries. You have the right to remain silent. As he read her rights, my mother stared straight ahead, no longer fighting or manipulating or trying to control the narrative. For the first time in my life, she looked completely defeated. And despite everything, despite the lies, the manipulation, the attempt to drag me down with her, I felt a stab of something that might have been pity. The officer who escorted my mother away was surprisingly gentle with her, but I still flinched when I heard the handcuffs click. Detective Martinez sat back down across from me, his expression softer now. Are you okay, Emma? I wasn't sure how to answer that. Was I okay? My mother had just been arrested for a hit and run, had tried to frame me as an accomplice, and had called me a bitch in front of a police officer. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the relief of being believed. Of having the truth actually matter. I think so, I said finally. What happens now? Now we process your mother's confession and continue building the case. The victim, his name is David Park, by the way, he's been asking about the investigation every day. His family will be relieved to know we've made an arrest. David Park. The name made it real in a way that, the cyclist, hadn't. This was an actual person with a family who'd been wondering if justice would ever come. Can I write him a letter? To apologize for my mother? Detective Martinez studied my face. That's thoughtful of you, but you don't need to apologize for someone else's actions. You did the right thing today. The right thing. Growing up, doing the right thing had usually meant going along with whatever story my mother was spinning, keeping the peace, not making waves. This felt completely different. My phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Emma, your mom's not answering her phone. Do you know where she is? I'm getting worried. My stomach clenched. He had no idea what was happening. He was probably at his construction job right now, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife had just confessed to a felony. Detective Martinez, my dad doesn't know about any of this. He's at work. We'll need to speak with him as part of the investigation, but you can call him first if you'd like. Break the news gently. I stared at my phone, trying to figure out how to even begin that conversation. Hey Dad, Mom got arrested for drunk driving and hitting someone. Oh, and also she tried to make me lie to police about it. There wasn't exactly a gentle way to deliver that information. Actually, Detective Martinez said, checking his watch, before you do that, I need to ask you a few more questions. About your mother's drinking habits. My heart sank. Of course they'd need to know about that too. She doesn't drink every day or anything like that. But when she gets stressed about money, or when she and my dad fight, she'll have wine in the afternoon. Sometimes a lot of wine. How often would you say this happens? I thought about all the times I come home from school to find her slightly too loud, slightly too emotional, slightly off in a way I'd learned to recognize. Maybe once or twice a week. More when things are really bad financially. He made notes. And your parents have been having financial problems? Yeah, for about 2 years now. Dad's construction company lost a big contract, and Mom's job at the dental office is only part-time. She mentioned the mortgage being behind, but I didn't know it was that bad. I paused. She's been shopping a lot though. Like, constantly. New clothes, expensive purses, stuff for the house. I always wondered how we could afford it if money was so tight. Has she ever driven after drinking before? That was the question I'd been dreading. Because the honest answer was yes, probably, but I'd never wanted to acknowledge it. I told myself she was just tired, or distracted, or having an off day. Anything but admitting my mother had a drinking problem. I think so, I said quietly. There were times when she'd seem fine when she left the house, but when she came back she'd be different. And she'd always have some excuse for why she took so long, or why she seemed confused. Detective Martinez nodded grimly. We'll be checking her recent credit card statements, looking for patterns of alcohol purchases. This confession today helps, but we need to build a complete picture for the district attorney. The district attorney. This was really happening. My mother was going to be prosecuted, possibly sent to prison. My family was about to be torn apart, and it was partly because I told the truth. But when I thought about David Park lying in a hospital bed, wondering if the person who'd hit him would ever face consequences, I knew I'd made the right choice. Even if it meant losing my mother forever. My phone kept buzzing with texts from my dad as Detective Martinez finished up his questions. Each notification made my stomach twist tighter. Emma, seriously, where's your mom? Her book club friends are calling me. Did she pick up her prescription today? The pharmacy called. Starting to worry. Call me back. Detective Martinez noticed me staring at my phone. You should probably call him soon. These things have a way of getting out, especially in smaller communities. Better he hears it from you than from a neighbor who saw the arrest on the evening news. The evening news. I hadn't even thought about that. In a few hours, my mother's arrest would probably be a story on Channel 7. Local woman arrested in hit-and-run case, with her booking photo flashing on screen while some anchor discussed the details of David Park's injuries. My dad would be devastated. He'd been covering for her drinking for months, making excuses when she was too sick to attend family gatherings, handling all the finances because she'd become overwhelmed by bills. He'd probably blame himself for not stopping her from driving that day. Before I call him, I said, I need to know something. What's going to happen to her? I mean, what kind of sentence are we talking about? Detective Martinez hesitated. That's really up to the district attorney and ultimately the judge, but felony hit-and-run with DUI carries serious penalties. Especially with her blood alcohol level being as high as it probably was at 3 p.m. if she'd been drinking since morning. How serious? Could be anywhere from 2 to 6 years, depending on her prior record and whether she takes a plea deal. The fact that she tried to involve you as a false alibi won't help her case. 6 years. I tried to imagine my life without my mother for 6 years, graduating college, maybe graduate school, starting a career, getting married someday. All while she sat in prison for something that could have been avoided if she'd just stayed home that afternoon. There's something else, Detective Martinez continued. We found David Park's bicycle wedged under a delivery truck about 3 blocks from the accident site. Your mother's impact sent him flying into the intersection, where he was nearly hit by the truck. The driver managed to stop, but just barely. I felt the blood drain from my face. He could have been killed. Yes. We're actually looking at upgrading some of the charges based on the severity of what could have happened. My phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen, and I knew I couldn't put this off any longer. I should take this, I said. Go ahead. Take your time. I walked to the far corner of the waiting room and answered on the 4th ring. Emma. Thank God. Where are you? Your mother never came home, and Mrs. Patterson said she saw police cars at the Nordstrom parking lot earlier. Mrs. Patterson. Our neighbor who noticed everything and shared it with everyone. She'd probably already called half the neighborhood. Dad, I need you to sit down. What? Why? Emma, you're scaring me. I closed my eyes and tried to find the gentlest way to destroy my father's world. Mom was arrested this afternoon. She was involved in a hit-and-run accident on Tuesday. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Dad? That's not possible. His voice came out flat, mechanical. Your mother was shopping with you on Tuesday. She told me when I got home from work. And there it was. She'd lied to him too, used our supposed shopping trip as her cover story at home. He'd been going about his life for 3 days, probably asking how the dress shopping went, completely unaware that his wife had left someone broken on the side of the road. Dad, I wasn't with her. I was at the library. She made that up. Another long pause. Then, quietly, oh, Emma. What has she done? The drive to the police station with my dad was one of the most uncomfortable 20 minutes of my life. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white, and he kept asking the same questions over and over. How much did she have to drink? Did you know she was drinking during the day? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't have good answers for any of it. How do you explain to your father that you've been covering for your mother's afternoon wine sessions for months because it seemed easier than dealing with the fights? How do you tell him that you'd noticed the empty bottles in the recycling bin but convinced yourself it was from dinner parties that never happened? She's been getting worse since the Henderson job fell through, I finally admitted. You've been working such long hours, and she's been home alone more. I think she was just lonely. And scared about money. Dad's jaw tightened. The Henderson job had been a $200,000 construction contract that would have carried his company through the next 18 months. When Henderson Development went bankrupt in March, it had taken Dad's security deposit and 3 months of unpaid work with it. Lonely doesn't excuse drunk driving, he said, but his voice cracked on the last word. Scared doesn't excuse leaving someone to die on the road. When we walked into the police station, Detective Martinez was waiting with a woman I hadn't met before, a tall black woman in a sharp gray suit who introduced herself as District Attorney Rebecca Walsh. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, she said, shaking Dad's hand. Your wife has been very cooperative since her arrest. She's agreed to make a full statement with her attorney present. Her attorney? Dad looked confused. We don't have an attorney. The court-appointed one, Detective Martinez explained. Public defender named Michael Reeves. He's been with her for the past hour, going over her options. D.A. Walsh opened a file folder. Mr. Chen, I need to be direct with you. Your wife's blood alcohol content at the time of the accident was likely around 0.15, nearly twice the legal limit. The victim, David Park, is a 34-year-old father of 2 who was cycling home from his job at the Children's Hospital. He's been in intensive care since Tuesday. My dad's face went gray. Children's Hospital. He's a pediatric nurse, she continued. Well respected, no criminal record, just trying to get home to his family. Your wife's decision to flee the scene has caused additional trauma to his family, who spent 3 days not knowing if the person who hurt him would ever be held accountable. I watched my dad process this information, saw the exact moment when the full weight of what Mom had done really hit him. David Park wasn't just the cyclist anymore, he was someone's husband, someone's father, someone who spent his days taking care of sick children. What are you offering her? Dad asked quietly. D.A. Walsh exchanged a look with Detective Martinez. Given her cooperation and the fact that Mr. Park is expected to make a full recovery, we're prepared to offer a plea deal. 4 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 months if she completes alcohol treatment programs. 4 years. I felt Dad's hand find mine and squeeze it tight. If she doesn't take the plea, he asked. We go to trial. She's looking at 6 to 8 years on the hit and run alone, plus additional charges for the DUI, endangerment, and providing false information to police. The jury won't be sympathetic to someone who tried to frame their own daughter. Dad flinched like he'd been slapped. She tried to what? Detective Martinez pulled out his notepad. Your wife initially claimed Emma was with her during the time of the accident, shopping at Nordstrom. When Emma provided evidence that she was actually at the university library, your wife accused Emma of lying and produced a text message allegedly asking for a false alibi. The text message was fake, I added quickly. Our tech team confirmed it was created using a spoofing app and inserted into her message history. Dad stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, part horror, part heartbreak, part rage. She tried to make you take the blame. She tried to make it look like I was asking her to lie for me, yeah. The silence that followed was deafening. My dad had always known Mom could be manipulative, but this was different. This crossed every line. I want to see her, he said finally. D.A. Walsh nodded. She's meeting with her attorney right now, but I can arrange a visit after they're finished. Mr. Chen, I should warn you, she's in a very fragile state. The reality of her situation is setting in. As if on cue, we heard shouting from somewhere deeper in the building. A woman's voice, high and desperate, screaming something about how it wasn't fair, how she'd already lost everything. Dad closed his eyes. That's her, isn't it? Detective Martinez nodded grimly. She's been having episodes since the confession. The jail's medical staff is monitoring her, but she's struggling. The shouting continued for another minute before being muffled, probably by a closing door. In the sudden quiet, Dad's phone started ringing. It's my foreman, he said, looking at the caller ID. Probably wondering why I didn't show up for the Riverside job this afternoon. He declined the call and turned to D.A. Walsh. How long do we have to decide about the plea? 72 hours. But Mr. Chen, there's something else we need to discuss. D.A. Walsh pulled out another folder, this one significantly thicker. During our investigation into your wife's activities, we discovered some financial irregularities that we need to address. My stomach dropped. The way she said financial irregularities made it sound much worse than Mom's shopping addiction. What kind of irregularities? Dad asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected. Your wife has been using your joint credit cards to make cash advances totaling approximately $47,000 over the past 8 months. The money was then deposited into a separate checking account that you're not listed on. Dad's face went completely white. $47,000. That's impossible. Our credit limit isn't even. She opened 3 new cards using your construction company as collateral, Detective Martinez interrupted. Apparently she's been intercepting the mail so you wouldn't see the statements. I thought about all those packages that had been arriving at our house. Mom had always rushed to get the mail before Dad came home, claiming she was expecting wedding invitations or book club newsletters. The shopping bags in her closet with tags still on them. Her insistence on handling all the household bills because Dad was too busy with work. Where did the money go? I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. D.A. Walsh flipped through several pages. Most of it appears to have been spent on luxury items, spa treatments, and what looks like gambling. Online poker, specifically. We found records of deposits to several gaming websites. Gambling? Dad's voice cracked. Linda doesn't gamble. She thinks casinos are trashy. Online gambling is different, D.A. Walsh explained. It's private, accessible from home, and easy to hide from family members. The spending pattern suggests she may have developed a significant addiction over the past year. The pieces started falling into place with horrible clarity. Mom's mood swings that seemed tied to something other than Dad's work schedule. Her secretiveness about her phone and computer. The way she'd become obsessed with checking her email constantly. The strange calls she'd get that she claimed were telemarketers. How much does she owe total? Dad asked quietly. Between the cash advances, accumulated interest, and the existing balance on your original cards, you're looking at approximately $73,000 in credit card debt. Plus the 4 months of missed mortgage payments she mentioned, which puts your house in pre-foreclosure status. Dad sat down heavily in the nearest chair. In the span of one afternoon, he'd learned that his wife was a drunk driver, a hit-and-run criminal, and had secretly gambled away their entire financial future. Mr. Chen, D.A. Walsh continued gently, I'm telling you this because it affects the plea negotiations. Your wife's gambling addiction provides context for her desperation on Tuesday afternoon. She'd just received a call from the mortgage company about foreclosure proceedings. According to her statement, she'd been drinking since 11 a.m. and decided to drive to the bank to try to negotiate some kind of payment plan. But she hit David Park at 3:45, I said. What was she doing for 4 hours? Detective Martinez checked his notes. She says she drove around aimlessly after the bank manager refused to help her. She was trying to work up the courage to come home and tell your father about the debt. The irony was crushing. She'd been driving drunk, trying to figure out how to confess to financial crimes, when she committed an even worse crime. And then she'd spent 3 days lying about all of it. Dad's phone rang again. This time it was our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Don't answer it, I said quickly. She'll just want details to spread around the neighborhood. But Dad was staring at his phone with a strange expression. She's called 4 times in the past hour. That's not like her. He answered on the last ring. Hello, Mrs. Patterson. Even from across the room, I could hear her excited voice chattering through the speaker. Dad's expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. When did this happen? He asked. Are you sure it was Channel 7? My heart sank. The news crews had already picked up the story. No, don't give them any information. Don't even talk to them. Dad hung up and turned to us with a haunted look. There are news vans outside our house. 3 of them. Mrs. Patterson says reporters have been knocking on doors all afternoon, asking neighbors about Linda's drinking habits. D.A. Walsh cursed under her breath. Someone leaked the arrest details. This happens sometimes with DUI cases involving injury. What does this mean for us? I asked. It means your family's private business is about to become very public, she said honestly. The gambling, the debt, the false alibi attempt, all of it will probably come out during the trial coverage. Dad buried his face in his hands. My business partners are going to see this. My clients. Emma's college classmates. I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. Even now, even after everything she'd done, Mom was still finding ways to hurt us. Her choices on Tuesday afternoon weren't just going to send her to prison, they were going to destroy Dad's construction business and follow me around campus for the rest of my college career. There is one option, D.A. Walsh said carefully. If your wife takes the plea deal and agrees to make a full public apology to David Park and his family, we might be able to minimize the media attention. Show genuine remorse, accept responsibility, and most importantly, don't drag this out with a lengthy trial. And if she doesn't? Dad asked. Then this becomes a much bigger story. Mother tries to frame daughter in hit-and-run case is the kind of headline that cable news picks up. It could drag on for months. As if summoned by her words, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages from classmates, Facebook tags, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Someone had already connected me to the story. Emma Chen, isn't your mom the one who got arrested for that hit-and-run? Read a text from Sarah, a girl in my organic chemistry class. Another one from Jake, holy shit, are you okay? I just saw the news. And then, most crushing of all, a message from my cousin Emma, whose wedding Mom had supposedly been shopping for, and Linda was arrested. What happened? Mom is freaking out. The family didn't even know yet. In a few hours, I was going to have to explain to my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my younger cousins, that their respectable daughter-in-law and aunt wasn't who they thought she was. I need to call my family, I told Dad. Before they see it on the news. D.A. Walsh nodded. Take your time. But Emma, when you do talk to people, remember that anything you say could potentially be used in court. Keep it simple, stick to facts, and don't speculate about your mother's state of mind or motivations. As Dad and I walked toward the exit to make our phone calls, I heard that desperate shouting again from somewhere in the building. My mother, still raging against the consequences of her own choices. For the first time since this all started, I didn't feel even a flicker of sympathy for her. The courthouse steps felt surreal under the morning sun. 2 weeks had passed since Mom's arrest, and today was the plea hearing. Dad gripped my hand as we walked past the small cluster of reporters who'd been following the case since Channel 7's initial story broke it wide open. Emma Chen. A blonde reporter thrust a microphone toward me. How do you feel about your mother's plea agreement? I kept walking, following the advice D.A. Walsh had given us, say nothing, look straight ahead, get inside as quickly as possible. But I could hear the cameras clicking, knew that tonight's news would probably feature footage of me hurrying up these steps in my black dress and Dad's too-big suit jacket. Inside the courtroom, I finally saw Mom for the first time since her arrest. She looked smaller somehow, wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on her frame. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she turned to look at us, I barely recognized her face, hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, a new thinness that made her look decades older. Her court-appointed attorney, Michael Reeves, was a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd called Dad 3 times over the weekend to go over the plea details. Mom would plead guilty to felony hit-and-run and DUI causing injury. 4 years in state prison, eligible for parole after 30 months with good behavior and completion of alcohol treatment programs. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison, the bailiff called out. Judge Morrison was a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who'd apparently built her career on tough sentences for drunk driving cases. According to Mr. Reeves, we were lucky she was even considering the plea deal given Mom's attempt to fabricate evidence. This is case number 2023, CR 4471, People vs. Linda Chen, the clerk announced. Defendant is present with counsel. I watched Mom stand up, her movements shaky and uncertain. This woman who controlled every conversation, manipulated every situation, planned every detail of our family life, now looked lost and fragile. Mrs. Chen, Judge Morrison began, you're here today to enter a plea in connection with a hit-and-run incident that occurred on October 15th, in which David Park was seriously injured. Do you understand the charges against you? Yes, Your Honor, Mom whispered, so quietly I could barely hear her. I need you to speak up, Mrs. Chen. Yes, Your Honor, I understand the charges. Her voice was clearer now, but it trembled on every word. Judge Morrison reviewed the terms of the plea agreement while I tried to process that this was really happening. In a few minutes, my mother would officially be a convicted felon. Her nursing license would be permanently revoked. Her name would be in databases forever, associated with drunk driving and leaving someone to die. But then Judge Morrison said something that made my blood freeze. Before we proceed, Mrs. Chen, I need to address a concern that's been brought to my attention. It appears there may be additional victims related to your pattern of impaired driving. Additional victims? Dad and I exchanged confused glances. This wasn't part of the plea agreement we'd discussed. D.A. Walsh stood up, looking as surprised as we were. Your Honor, I'm not aware of any additional charges being filed. Mrs. Walsh, please approach the bench. As the lawyers huddled with Judge Morrison in hushed conversation, I felt my stomach drop. Mom had turned completely white, gripping the defendant's table like she might collapse. After what felt like hours, the lawyers returned to their positions. Judge Morrison's expression had grown considerably more severe. It has come to the court's attention that there was a previous incident on September 22nd involving Mrs. Chen's vehicle and property damage in the Westfield Shopping Center parking lot. Mrs. Chen, were you planning to disclose this incident as part of your plea agreement? The courtroom went dead silent. September 22nd. I remembered that day clearly because it was my birthday, and Mom had been late to my dinner celebration, claiming she'd gotten held up at work. Mom's attorney looked completely blindsided. Your Honor, this is the first I'm hearing of any September incident. Mrs. Chen. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. I'm going to ask you directly. Have there been other incidents involving impaired driving that you have not disclosed to this court or to the prosecution? Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. For several long seconds, she just stood there shaking. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said the words that would change everything. There were 3 other times. 3 other times. The words hung in the courtroom air like a toxic cloud. I felt Dad's hand go limp in mine as we both stared at the back of Mom's head, watching her shoulders shake with what might have been sobs or laughter. I couldn't tell which. Judge Morrison's voice turned ice cold. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to need you to be very specific. When you say 3 other times, what exactly are you referring to? Mom's attorney was frantically shuffling through papers, clearly trying to figure out how his client had just blown up her own plea deal. D.A. Walsh had gone rigid in her chair, probably calculating how many additional charges she'd need to file. Mom started, then stopped. She turned to look at Dad and me, her eyes red and desperate. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Mrs. Chen, Judge Morrison interrupted sharply, you need to answer the question. What 3 other incidents are you referring to? Mom wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so unlike her usual composed demeanor that it was jarring. September 22nd, I hit a parked car at Westfield Mall. August 14th, I scraped against a mailbox on Elm Street. And July 3rd, I knocked over a stop sign on Pine Avenue. July 3rd was the 4th of July weekend. We'd had a barbecue at Uncle Mark's house, and Mom had volunteered to pick up ice cream on the way home. She'd returned 3 hours later claiming the grocery store lines were absolutely insane, and she'd had to stop at 4 different places. Were you under the influence of alcohol during these incidents? Judge Morrison asked. Yes, Your Honor. Mom's voice cracked completely. Every time. D.A. Walsh shot to her feet. Your Honor, I request an immediate recess to investigate these new revelations. The people may need to withdraw the current plea agreement. Granted. We'll reconvene at 2 p.m. Judge Morrison's gavel came down like a gunshot. Mrs. Chen, you'll remain in custody while the prosecution reviews this new information. Mr. Reeves, I suggest you have a very long conversation with your client about the importance of full disclosure. As the bailiff led Mom away, she turned one more time to look at us. Her mouth moved silently, I think she was trying to say, I love you, but no sound came out. Dad and I sat in stunned silence until the courtroom had mostly emptied. Finally, he spoke. July 3rd. That's why she was so weird at dinner that night. She kept apologizing for being late and talking about how stressful driving had become. He rubbed his face with both hands. August 14th was when she came home with that story about helping a lost tourist. Said that's why she seemed shaken up. And September 22nd, I added quietly, my birthday. She showed up to dinner with grass stains on her pants and claimed she'd slipped in the restaurant parking lot. 4 incidents. For times she'd gotten behind the wheel drunk, hit something, and driven away. For times she'd come home and lied to our faces about what had happened. D.A. Walsh approached us as we sat there processing. Mr. Chen, Emma, I need to be honest with you. This changes everything. If your wife has been driving impaired and causing property damage for months, we're looking at a pattern of escalating behavior that culminates in serious bodily injury to David Park. What does that mean for the plea deal? Dad asked. It's probably off the table. Judge Morrison takes drunk driving cases very seriously, and she doesn't tolerate defendants who withhold information. Your wife is now looking at multiple hit-and-run charges, multiple DUI charges, and the judge is going to want to know why she lied during the plea negotiations. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, saw the news alert. Your mom's hearing got postponed. Everything okay? News alert. Of course the reporters outside had already picked up on the hearing disruption. By tonight, the story would be about how Linda Chen had been hiding multiple drunk driving incidents, how her criminal behavior was even worse than initially reported. There's something else, D.A. Walsh continued. We're going to need to investigate whether there were any injuries in those previous incidents that your wife might not be aware of. A knocked-over stop sign could have caused an accident later. A damaged mailbox might belong to an elderly resident who was traumatized by the incident. The scope of Mom's destruction just kept expanding. It wasn't just David Park who'd been hurt by her choices. It was every person who'd had to deal with mysterious property damage over the past few months, wondering who had hit their car or destroyed their mailbox and driven away. I need some air, I told Dad, standing up on unsteady legs. Outside the courthouse, the reporters immediately swarmed us again. Emma, were you aware of your mother's previous incidents? Mr. Chen, how do you feel knowing your wife has been lying to the court? Is it true Linda Chen has a gambling addiction that contributed to these crimes? Dad put his arm around me and we pushed through the crowd toward his truck. But as we reached the parking lot, one reporter's question stopped me cold. Emma, sources say your mother tried to blame you for asking her to lie to police. Do you think she'll try to minimize her responsibility for these new charges too? I turned around to face the woman who'd asked, a brunette from Channel 12 with perfectly applied makeup and predatory eyes. My mother, I said clearly, is responsible for her own choices. All of them. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I meant every word. The recess felt endless. Dad and I sat in his truck in the courthouse parking lot, neither of us wanting to go home and face the reporters camped outside our house, but not knowing where else to go. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing, texts from classmates, missed calls from relatives, notifications from news apps tracking the story. There's something I need to tell you, Dad said suddenly, breaking the silence we'd maintained for the past hour. I looked at him. His hands were still gripping the steering wheel even though the engine was off, his knuckles white with tension. I knew about the drinking. The words hit me like cold water. What do you mean you knew? Not the driving. Jesus, Emma, I never would have let her drive if I'd known she was getting behind the wheel drunk. But the afternoon drinking. I've known for months. I stared at him, trying to process this admission. Then why didn't you do anything? I tried. His voice cracked. Back in August, I found empty wine bottles hidden in the garage. When I confronted her, she broke down crying, said she was just stressed about money and promised it would never happen again. She begged me not to make it into a bigger issue than it was. August. Right around the time of the Elm Street mailbox incident. She convinced me it was just a phase, Dad continued. Said once the Henderson contract situation got resolved and the financial pressure eased up, she'd be fine. She made me feel like I was overreacting, like pushing too hard would just drive her to drink more. The familiar pattern of Mom's manipulation, but this time aimed at Dad instead of me. Making him question his own judgment, convincing him that his reasonable concerns were somehow unreasonable. I started coming home for lunch sometimes, trying to catch her in the act, but she was smart about it. She'd use mouthwash, eat peppermints, spray air freshener. If I asked her directly, she'd get angry and accuse me of not trusting her. Dad, you should have. Should have what? He turned to face me, and I saw guilt and exhaustion etched in every line of his face. Called the police on my own wife. Had her committed. You think I didn't consider it? But Emma, she wasn't just some stranger with a drinking problem. She was your mother. My partner of 22 years. I kept thinking I could handle it quietly, help her get better without destroying our family. I understood that logic, even if I hated it. How many times had I covered for Mom's afternoon mood swings, made excuses for her erratic behavior, convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than confronting the problem. The gambling though, Dad continued, I had no idea about that. The credit cards, the secret bank account, the $47,000, she hid all of it. I've been going through our finances since the arrest, trying to figure out how I missed it. And she was intercepting bank statements, rerouting credit card bills to a P.O. box I didn't know about. She'd been paying minimum payments on everything using cash advances from other cards, basically robbing Peter to pay Paul for months. It's like she created this whole separate financial reality. My phone rang. Mr. Reeves, Mom's attorney. Emma. Is your father with you? We need to meet before the hearing resumes. Your mother wants to make another statement, and frankly, I'm concerned about what else she might reveal in open court. Another statement. My stomach clenched. What kind of statement? She's insisting there are people she needs to apologize to personally. She has a list of names and addresses, people whose property she damaged, people she thinks might have been affected by her actions. She wants to contact them directly. I looked at Dad, who'd heard enough of the conversation to look alarmed. Mr. Reeves, I said, is that legally advisable? Absolutely not. Any contact with potential victims could be seen as tampering or intimidation, even if her intentions are good. But your mother is, she's not thinking clearly right now. She keeps saying she needs to make things right before sentencing. Before sentencing. The plea deal was definitely dead. We'll be there in 10 minutes, Dad said, taking the phone from me. As we drove back toward the courthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mom's confessions weren't over. If she'd hidden 4 drunk driving incidents, a gambling addiction, and $47,000 in secret debt, what else was she going to reveal in her desperate attempt to make things right? And how much more damage would she do to our family before this was finally over? The meeting with Mr. Reeves took place in a cramped conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Mom sat across from us in her orange jumpsuit, clutching a piece of paper covered in her neat handwriting. She looked up when we entered, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, complete, devastating clarity. Emma, sweetheart, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice steadier than it had been in court. And David, I know I've destroyed everything we built together. Dad sat down heavily. Linda, Mr. Reeves says you want to contact the victims directly. You can't do that. I have to. She smoothed the paper in front of her. There are 12 people on this list. 12 families whose property I damaged, whose lives I disrupted. They deserve to know it was me. 12. My heart sank. In court she'd only confessed to 3 previous incidents. Mr. Reeves rubbed his temples. Mrs. Chen, as I explained earlier, any contact with potential victims could result in additional charges. Witness tampering, harassment, you're already looking at 15 years if the prosecutor decides to throw the book at you. 15 years. Dad's voice came out strangled. The new incidents she's describing span back 18 months, Mr. Reeves explained. That's not a recent drinking problem, that's a sustained pattern of criminal behavior. Mom unfolded her paper and began reading in a mechanical voice. March 15, 2022. Sideswiped a Honda Civic on University Avenue. April 2nd, knocked over a bicycle rack at the community center. May 18th, clipped the side mirror off a delivery truck on Main Street. She'd been drunk driving for over a year and a half. All those afternoons when I come home from school and found her napping on the couch, claiming she had a headache or was feeling under the weather. All those evenings when Dad worked late and she'd seemed unusually affectionate and chatty during dinner. The timeline of our family's last 2 years suddenly looked completely different. June 9th, she continued, scratched the paint on 3 cars in a Target parking lot. June 30th, drove through Mrs. Patterson's flower bed. July 3rd, the stop sign on Pine Avenue. August 14th, the mailbox on Elm Street. September 22nd, Westfield Mall. October 2nd, knocked over a street lamp on Riverside Drive. October 8th, damaged a park bench at Maple Grove Park. And October 15th. David Park, I finished quietly. She nodded, tears finally starting to flow. I remember every single one. I'd tell myself each time that it was the last time, that I'd stop drinking, that I'd get help. But then something would stress me out, a bill we couldn't pay, another rejection from the bank, watching you and your father work so hard while I felt useless, and I'd pour that first glass of wine. Mr. Reeves was taking notes frantically. Mrs. Chen, when D.A. Walsh returns, she's going to have to file additional charges for every incident you've just described. We're talking about 12 separate hit-and-run cases, 12 DUI charges. The sentence exposure here could be 20 to 25 years. 25 years. I would be 44 when she got out. Dad would be 70. She would miss my entire adult life. There's more, Mom whispered. The room went dead silent. Dad made a sound like he'd been punched. What more could there possibly be? Mr. Reeves asked, though his tone suggested he didn't actually want to know. Mom reached into her pocket and pulled out a second piece of paper. The gambling debts aren't just $47,000. I've been taking money from other places. What other places? Dad asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected. Your retirement account. Emma's college fund. The life insurance policy we borrowed against for the house down payment. She looked directly at me. Your college fund is gone, sweetheart. All $23,000. I'm so sorry. My college fund. The money my grandparents had contributed to for 18 years. The safety net that was supposed to help me graduate debt-free and start my adult life without the burden of student loans. When? I asked. The withdrawal started in January. The last one was 2 weeks ago. She was crying openly now. I kept telling myself I'd win it back, that I just needed one good night online to recover everything. But I never won. I just kept losing and borrowing more to try to win back what I'd already lost. 25 years in prison. My college fund gone. Dad's retirement stolen. Our house in foreclosure. Everything we'd built as a family, destroyed by a woman who couldn't stop drinking and couldn't stop gambling and couldn't stop lying about both. The conference room door opened and D.A. Walsh walked in, her expression grim. I've been listening from the hallway, she said. Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand that anything you've said in this room can and will be used against you in court. You've just confessed to multiple felonies that we hadn't even identified yet. Mom nodded. I know. I'm tired of lying. The plea deal is officially withdrawn. We're looking at filing 18 additional charges, and I'm recommending the maximum sentence on all counts. Dad stood up abruptly. I need some air. As he headed for the door, Mom called after him, David, please don't leave me. I know I don't deserve it, but please don't leave me to face this alone. Dad paused with his hand on the doorknob, his back still turned to her. You've been alone with this for 18 months, Linda. We're just finding out about it now. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone with my mother and the wreckage of our entire life. The sentencing hearing took place 3 months later, on a gray February morning that felt appropriate for endings. Mom had spent those months in county jail, and when I saw her led into the courtroom in shackles, I barely recognized the woman who'd raised me. She'd lost at least 30 pounds, her hair had gone almost completely gray, and she moved like someone much older than 43. The courtroom was packed. David Park was there with his wife and 2 young daughters, sitting in the front row. Behind them were other victims, the elderly man whose mailbox she'd destroyed, the college student whose car she'd sideswiped, the family whose flower bed she'd driven through. 18 separate incidents, 18 families whose lives had been disrupted by my mother's choices. Judge Morrison had reviewed all the evidence, all the confessions, all the financial records that painted a picture of systematic deception spanning nearly 2 years. The final tally was staggering: $73,000 in credit card debt, $23,000 stolen from my college fund, $41,000 taken from Dad's retirement account, plus thousands more in property damage she'd caused and never paid for. Mrs. Chen, Judge Morrison began, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a comprehensive pattern of criminal behavior masked as suburban respectability. You drove drunk 57 times over 18 months. You caused property damage in 18 separate incidents. You committed financial fraud against your own family. And when finally caught, you attempted to frame your teenage daughter as an accomplice. Mom stood with her attorney, her hands shaking visibly. She'd written a letter of apology that Mr. Reeves had submitted to the court, but reading it had only made me angrier. Even in her supposed remorse, she'd focused more on her own pain and addiction than on the harm she'd caused others. Your Honor, D.A. Walsh said, standing to address the court, the people recommend 22 years in state prison. Mrs. Chen's actions endangered countless innocent people and destroyed her family's financial future. The defendant has shown no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught. 22 years. I'd be 41 when she got out. Dad would be 68. By then, whatever love or family connection we'd once shared would be ancient history. David Park's victim impact statement was devastating. He described months of physical therapy, the financial strain of missed work, his daughters asking why the woman who hurt Daddy was allowed to just drive away. When he finished, his wife stood up. Your Honor, our family forgives Linda Chin. But forgiveness doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences. We need to know that someone who makes these choices will face justice. Then it was my turn. I'd written and rewritten my own statement dozens of times, trying to find words for what my mother had done to our family. But standing at that podium, looking at her hunched figure at the defendant's table, I realized I only needed to say one thing. Your Honor, 3 months ago my mother asked the police why I was lying about my location. Today we know who the real liar was. She didn't just lie about Tuesday afternoon, she lied about everything. For 18 months, she looked us in the eye every day and lied about who she was and what she was doing. That betrayal will stay with my father and me long after she serves whatever sentence you impose. Judge Morrison nodded gravely. Mrs. Chen, please stand. Mom struggled to her feet, leaning heavily on the defendant's table. I hereby sentence you to 19 years in the California state prison system, with the possibility of parole after 14 years pending completion of alcohol and gambling addiction programs. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with finality. As the bailiff led Mom away, she turned one last time to look at Dad and me. Her mouth moved silently, forming words I couldn't hear and no longer wanted to understand. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free.